This is the third part in my series on EMF, and for this part I'm just going to talk about tips for general daily living. So when it comes to working with computers, I found that Apple Macs are better than PCs in terms of the harmful effects that I receive from having to work with the computer. You'll want to sit as far away from the screen as possible, and a laptop is going to be better than a desktop. Okay? Now, when it comes to working with these devices, the part of you that is very actively engaged, of course, is your brain. And I found that taking brain supplements can be very helpful. And you don't have to take them all the time. Maybe just do a course a couple of times a year, which is what I like to do. Now, Gerald and Advanced Orthomolecular Research have some wonderful formulations. Also taking B12, Now Brand has these packets that you can take sublingually, and I find that they really help. They also help with memory too. Now, some techniques that you can actually use. One is writing, like say if you keep a diary, writing in longhand cursive is great for syncing up the right and the left sides of the brain. A friend of mine, her grandfather had a stroke, and he couldn't even use his hands, and he just started very slowly writing with longhand cursive, and he was completely able to regain all his functions, not just physical functions, but also it enhanced his brain functioning. And he actually, at the time she was telling me the story, he was 90 years old, and it had been 20 years since he'd had the stroke. So writing longhand cursive is a really wonderful way to heal your brain and sync the right and the left sides of your hemispheres up. Another thing that naturally occurs when we walk is what's called cross crawl. Basically, when your right foot goes forward and then your left arm goes out, and then your left foot goes forward and your right arm goes out. That's syncing up with the right and the left sides, which naturally happens when you walk and when you run. Has been put into an exercise that you can, Donna Eden has written a book called Energy Medicine, and in there she talks about it, and she shows you the exercise where you can really just lie on your back and just do that cross crawl action. It's really, really healing and helpful for the brain. It's great anytime you're sort of feeling scrambled or mixed up, even having nothing to do with EMFs, right? That can be a very useful exercise that just allows you, enhances just being human essentially. So in the living environment, some things you may not have considered. Living in a high-rise can actually be better, anything from, story 5 and above, because you're above that ambient grid of electricity. So think about that. Living in a house is better than an apartment. An apartment's going to be more electrified, right? Living in an older home is better because the materials tend to be more natural. And then also in newer subdivisions, you can see that they put the electricity underground, which can be a bit of a nightmare when you're living in the home. But it's actually better when you're walking around in the streets than the above ground electricity, because when you're walking around, the electricity is everywhere. So it's a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in determining that. Living in a ground floor apartment, having a garden, keeping plants around you, salt lamps are great. The negative ions they release can be very calming. And of course, the most important thing is just spending time in nature. Just lying on the ground for 20 minutes can be extremely beneficial, especially if you're feeling buzzed. So probably spending time in nature might be the most useful thing that I can recommend to you. Thank you.